Welcome to Talkin' Science, where we dive into the stories making headlines in the world of science and space. I'm Matt Miller. Dr. Brad Tucker is back. Brad, happy Tuesday.
How's it going?
Really well, my friend. Let's get the headlines in this, the 47th week of 2021. NASA gearing up to launch the DART mission. An Aussie company joins the global fight to tackle space junk. And Astra reaches orbit with their 7th launch.
This is Trek Zone's Talkin' Science.
Well, don't forget Trek Zone membership available via the join button under each video on YouTube or via the trek.zone/support. Plus Trek Zone's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and your favourite podcast feed. Find us, like, follow, and subscribe. Brad 2 on social media at btucker22 on Twitter and Dr. Brad Tucker on Facebook. Brad, welcome back. Work's snowed you in for a few weeks.
Yeah, it's been just a busy couple of weeks for us to coordinate schedules.
It absolutely has, and a huge thanks to Tom Crow for filling in while you were away. Let's get on with the show. The world's first 3D printed hypersonic platform has been revealed by our friends at Hypersonics, Brad. They've used high temperature alloys to make it happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the scramjets and hypersonic work, and a lot of people are going to these 3D materials for reusability, easeability. So it's interesting to see how this may unfold in the future.
Absolutely. Well, Optus is teaming up with Arianespace as their launch partner for the next gen Optus 11. It's going to replace the venerable D1 satellite, which I've linked to in my time in news gathering. But to me, sending this launch offshore is an example of why sovereign launch capability is so important to us here in Australia.
Yeah, look, Optus has been working on this next launch, Optus 11, for a while. I think it's scheduled for 2023. It's good to see that they have a partner, but yes, there will always be more satellites in Australia that need to be launched, and a growing number of them. So it's good to see that there's lots of groups trying to solve the various problems of what we put into space and how we put into it.
Now, Brad, into our stories of the week. NASA's gearing up for the launch of their DART mission this week. As you wrote for The Guardian, we can't be expecting Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis to be on standby and I forget her name, but, staring at those screens longingly. So what's DART hoping to prove?
Don't forget Steve Buscemi here.
Oh, yes, of
the
course.
Unsung hero. No, look, so DART is a science fiction-y sounding mission, but it really is a response to how do we deal with a potentially hazardous asteroid. And so DART will, called the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, will launch a craft that will essentially try and slam in to a small asteroid. So the system Didymos has 2, A and B, and it'll crash into the smaller one, seeing how much just using essentially sheer impact, we can nudge an asteroid. Because the idea is if you can nudge an asteroid far away from Earth enough, you don't have to worry about it. Shifting it even far away enough can mean that it can fly right by the Earth if you do it far away enough. So knowing how much we can shift it, how much we can impact the orbit will tell us what we would need to do in the unfortunate and unlikely event we need to.
Now, Didymos, being a binary asteroid, as you mentioned, that's part of the key here to be able to easily identify the success of the mission using the orbit of the 2 asteroids together to determine whether DART made a difference.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Is the idea is if we were just to nudge one by itself, the amount we're going to shift it would actually be really hard to measure just in terms of it going around, say, the sun. But because they're spinning around each other, in fact, in particular, Didymos B is orbiting around the larger one by separation of about 1 kilometer, we can see how much that orbit changes because it's doing it so often. You can take these images from ground-based telescopes a lot and precisely measure how much and in what direction that orbit was shifted, really giving us then a big clue as to what kind of impact we can inflict on an asteroid. And keeping in mind, the asteroid, even though we say it's small, it's still like 160 meters wide. It's not nothing.
Well, one idea was to paint part of the Earth white or placing a heap of mirrors on the ground, and that would reflect sunlight to act as a light beam to move the asteroid, all part of this idea of how we're going to deal with an asteroid coming towards us, destroying all life as we know it, and dogs into craters on the ground. Armageddon reference. Sounds wacky, but not that far-fetched, really, if they were thinking about it, I guess, Brad, all these different ideas.
Yeah, look, it was something that before the Obama administration ended, they commissioned this whole report of saying, look, what do we need to do for a potential hazardous asteroid? And it actually starts before this point, detecting them, cataloging them, searching for them. So it's not just this sole, hey, we run into things. And then what options do we have? This isn't the only option. There was, as you said, lots of options put forth. And, if you have enough sunlight, it will emit enough pressure, and we know it can push things. So it's not that strange. This was the one that was simple, relatively speaking, feasible, and cost-effective, and that was kind of this balance. What is meeting all of those criteria, and you can do it. Again, this is a test. This asteroid poses no danger. You want to do it early enough and test it early enough so you know what works and what doesn't. So maybe they do need one of those other options, and if so, have time to test that one as well.
Well, as the planned power outage takes hold here, my lighting has dimmed a little bit. Never mind, we will crack on with the show. As you say, Brad, the asteroid pair pose no threat to Earth, but is there a chance DART might do something to change that?
This asteroid is so far away that even if it inflicts damage on the other one, it's not going to do anything. And I think a lot of people worried, well, maybe they'll mistakenly knock it into the Earth. This is not what we're talking about. Again, we are not going to nuke and alter dramatically the course of an asteroid. A, that's just not physically possible. B, in Armageddon, both chunks of the asteroid still hit the Earth, just separately. C, we're not about that. You're just, again, it's giving that slight push to give you that slight breeze to steer you off course. And that's the name of the game here.
And don't forget Deep Impact as well, Brad. That was another good disaster movie of the 90s. That actually collided with Earth and had Zefram Cochrane from Star Trek First Contact as our president.
That's right. And, we don't have two fancy, undisclosed interstellar space shuttles just hanging around for a case like this. That unfortunately doesn't exist either. And the whole point of both of these missions, there's things that are much cheaper to do instead of training oil riggers and the like.
Exactly. Well, let's keep going. An Australian company has joined an international effort to recycle space junk into rocket fuel. How's this one going to work, Brad?
So this is kind of a few different companies coming together to tag team a problem. And so the idea is that, well, there's lots of space junk, and there are groups working on how do we deal and collect that space junk. There are then groups who are dealing with how do we turn material into space into new material, new metals, new whatever the case may be. And then there are groups who are trying to use different compositions of fuel to power or create propulsion in space. And so the idea is, well, if we take these different segments, you can kind of create almost a supply chain and turn something that is junk into fuel. And, it's almost that same spirit of biofuel, right? How do you turn waste into something that can create energy? But now it's just trying to do it in space.
It is absolutely incredible. Now, we saw the potential effects of space junk last week following Russia's ASAT test, anti-satellite test. That sent the space station astronauts into their escape craft for 2 hours. Even a screw can cause catastrophic damage, and the problem's only getting worse, Brad, but at least we do have these mitigation strategies in place for the last couple of decades, but we obviously still have this space junk problem as we're seeing here.
Yeah, the idea is we want to start limiting the work. And we've talked about there's lots of different groups, including where we are in Canberra, working on this problem. So how do we go out and deal with it? It's not just not creating more, it's cleaning up the stuff that's there. And that's a big goal. But then you also have the other problem of one of the other big aspects is that satellites running out of fuel is a huge source of uh, potential space junk. These satellites become defunct, run out of fuel. Well, that's it. So if you can kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, well, that's all the better. You can clean up junk, and then you can create fuel to keep satellites going that will then produce less junk. So it's a win-win scenario that they came up with. So obviously, it'd be very exciting if they can get it to work.
Well, Newman Space joins Astroscale in Japan, NanoRocks and Cisluna in the US on this plan to use advanced robotics to store and cut up the debris in orbit, melting it down. As you say, it's pretty ingenious stuff.
Yeah, look, it is quite cool that what they're thinking about, and again, every different part of the supply chain has a purpose. It makes sense, but then if you can combine it all together, it's a win-win-win. So obviously, there's lots of testing. They all have to get their own bits of the supply chain, so to speak, their own processes working. But if they can pull it off, that's going to be remarkable because they will have solved a few different problems that lots of groups are working on. And this space junk problem isn't going to be solved by one method or one option. It's going to take a concerted effort from lots of different ways and parties and groups to solve it. And this is on that track.
Now, CEO of Newman Space, Hav Astia, said it wasn't as easy as it looks, but the prototype they built is working. I love this one because he thought that it was only an idea, but it was actually the plan moving forward. So I guess science fiction here, Brad, is closer than science fact.
Yeah, look, it's amazing how sometimes these ideas were, all right, let's give it a shot. And, I think that's one of the exciting things of having so many private companies involved in space focusing on these different problems is there are lots of different problems, and we only solve them if you try and test and do the research and development into it, and no one single group has enough effort or energy to do it all. And that's, I think, the amazing, exciting thing that you're seeing play almost out in real time.
Well, lastly this week, Brad, Astra, a private space startup, speaking of private space companies, have made it to orbit 12 months on from making it to space and just 5 years since they were founded.
Yeah, and this is kind of just showing how quickly these groups can pop up, that it doesn't take as long as it used to, let's say, to develop your own launch systems to go from an idea to reaching an orbit. And when you hear and talk about what Australia is doing and some of the groups in Australia, these ambitious goals almost aren't as ambitious as they may seem. It actually is closer to what you can do rather than just pure pie in the sky dreaming.
Now, I do think, though, that they missed a golden opportunity here. This mission was LV0007. It's too many zeros. It should have been 007.
Look, I guess they're forward thinking to have lots of different zeros in their system, but you're right. Sometimes you just got to seize the opportunity, whether that being launching into space or
Well, they carried a test payload for the US Space Force up with them, going 500 kilometres at an 86-degree inclination. Where does that put them in terms of satellites that we use every day, Brad?
So look, one of the reasons why they're quite excited is because they're launching from Alaska. They're a very northern site. They're trying to get to that northern polar orbit, which is one of the critical parts of space. Polar orbits, like what Southern Launch Alliance is trying to do to go into the South Pole, they're trying to go into the North Pole. So if you're not doing that, you're obviously going usually around the equator, and it's a lot easier to launch further north than from the equator trying to go to the north. If you're launching from Northern Territory, you're launching from Florida, it's a huge trip. There's a lot of effort to get that rocket into orbit around the pole, whereas when you're already starting from an easier starting point, let's say, it just makes the trip all that much easier.
What's next for Astra, Brad?
Look, they're really trying to now become a larger player of that polar orbit. That's the niche they're focusing on. They set up their system in Kodiak, which is in Alaska. Let's do the polar orbits because there's a need, there's a market, and it's a niche. And I think this is where all of space is finding it. what is that niche that you can do and provide? And the fact that U.S. Space Force has already put one of their payloads to test it, they're obviously very interested in that supply chain because, again, Space Force uses lots of other private companies, SpaceX, Lockheed Martin, UAL, United Launch Alliance, to put their satellites into it. So that's how they do it. They get a ride into space for their payload. And so if they have a supplier in the U.S. in particular that can take them to their polar orbits, which is what they want to do, there clearly is going to be a future for them that no one else is filling. And I think that's the key here. No one else is filling that need, just like, again, with Southern Launch Alliance in Australia, no one's filling that need as well, besides maybe Rocket Labs of trying to even get into that South Pole orbit, and both are important.
Well, just before we go, Brad, a look ahead to this week's Talkin' Science interview. Let's flash back to that time when I met Michael Smart from Hypersonics as they geared up to test their brand new scramjet rocket engine. Michael Smart is the head of research and development and the co-founder of Hypersonics. Michael, thanks for your time. Can you tell us a little bit about the company and what you're hoping to achieve?
Yes, Matt, we're a small startup company. We're all Australian technology, and we're taking some hypersonic technology that's been developed in Australia over a 30-year period, really, and we're taking it to the market, so creating real products out of the research that's been done here, world-leading research over 30 years.
Well, that one is out now from back in June. Click the card on our YouTube video or the link on the Trek Zone watch page to catch it in full. Members have first play access to some great content on the way. There's still 4 weeks of Trek Zone left in 2021. So sign up with the join button below this video on YouTube or go to thetrek.zone/support. Brad, it's great to pick apart the stories of the week with you. We'll do it all again next week.
Thanks.